success. Congratulations. No, this is great audience, and not that big quantity, but big quality. So that's very important. That's very important. Is Hall around? Oh, he.
نسعى أن نقدم لجميع من يريد بناء هذا البلد بالخدمات المختلفة في مجال اختصاص عملنا مستثمرين ومنظمين، ونستفيد من التجربة العالمية ونطبقها وفق مقاييس ومعايير القوانين العراقية النافذة. نسعى لتنشيط السوق من خلال توسيع قاعدة المستثمرين وبفتح منافذ جديدة سواء كانت بأسواق جديدة أو بوسطاء في المحافظات الأخرى غير بغداد. كذلك ندعو الشركات المساهمة التي لم تدرج في سوق الأوراق المالية لحد الآن إلى إدراجها في سوق الأوراق المالية، وهناك مبادرة مشكورة من قبل سوق العراق الأوراق المالية على فتح السوق الثاني تسهيلا لإدراج هذه المؤسسات في سوق الأوراق المالية بجانب السوق الأول أو السوق الأساسي. وتمت الموافقة على مزاولة هذا السوق، ومن المنتظر إكمال إجراءات التسجيل لكي يباشر عمله. إلا أننا وكما أسلفنا نعمل وفق القوانين ونحترمها ونعرف حدودنا وصلاحياتنا سعيا وراء احترام قراراتنا، ونسعى لضمان حقوق كافة أطراف السوق. وفق ذلك وعلينا أن نكون مستقلين ولا نحابب أحد على الآخر، نقف مع الجميع لضمان مصالحهم. إن أبواب هيئة الأوراق المالية وصدورنا مفتوحة أمام من يرغب بالبناء والتطوير، فأهلا ومرحبا بكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Now I'd like to welcome Mr. Taha Salam, CEO of the Iraq Stock Exchange, and along the years, a good friend of mine.
Iraq Stock Exchange had established and started operation in June 2004, operate under the oversight.
You feel are still out there in terms of things that concern people? Is it only the security issues, or what other things would make the future maybe look less rosy when presented that way?
Okay. I think the first one's been touched on already, which is custody, and until that is in place, I think the foreign involvement in the local exchange will be limited. So that I think that's probably one of the constraints on the exchange. Beyond that, I think there is a need probably for growing transparency in the market. I think it's very good in the context of the wider Middle East, but there is always room for improvement in any emerging market to ensure greater transparency. But in reality, I've seen a huge improvement in transparency in the last 2 to 3 years. And on an example of today, with a lot of the companies that are listed on the exchange coming today to meet investors, is testament to that improvement. Beyond that, I think that there's obviously the backdrop of the environment within Iraq that continues to be quite challenging for many investors to understand. And again, as the backdrop in Iraq improves, that should assist the market. But beyond that, I think I'd rather focus on the big macro picture, which frankly remains very positive. because frankly, I don't think the market is there yet, or I don't think any company is there yet to establish how they want to price deals. But if I look at the context of the wider region, I think there's been a very interesting move away from fixed price IPOs to more of an international style pricing where the market dictates or influences the value of the shares at the time of the IPO. So if I look at Saudi Arabia, they have introduced a form of book build where you go out to institutional funds before you launch the retail subscription, and those mutual funds give guidance on what price they're willing to pay for the shares that will be offered to the public. And once that has been confirmed with the mutual funds in Saudi Arabia, they then go out to the retail investor base with a fixed price. In Oman, there was
Probably talk about the group that he advised most here in Kurdistan. It's one of the most enterprising groups in Erbil, the car group. Brad?
It's active in trade. It's got some financial services, including insurance and banking interests, and it's ambitious in the oil and gas industry. The majority of my time has been focused on assisting them with a corporate strategy on how to take advantage of oil and gas opportunities, not only in the Kurdistan region, but in greater Iraq. To set the context of this, you have to recognize and understand that prior to 2003, if a company would have shown ambition in oil and gas, most likely the owners would no longer have their heads. It was absolutely a closed segment to the private sector, one strictly controlled by the government and absolutely controlled by the government in Baghdad. We saw no upstream, midstream, or downstream development in the Kurdistan region during the prior regime. Many of the Iraqi businessmen, as Iraq's liberation, sorry you see my politics, as the liberation of Iraq took place, recognized that oil and gas and the building of oil and gas infrastructure is the future driver of the economy here, and wanted to diversify into it, but they didn't really know how. The Kurdistan region jump-started its oil and gas industry by putting a legal framework in place with an oil and gas law in 2007. This oil and gas law not only allowed local companies and private businesses to be involved in the oil and gas sector for the first time, but it encouraged them specifically to be involved in the oil and gas sector. And I just put one small excerpt from the oil and gas law here, and I highlight the second paragraph of Article 9, which encourages the construction of all new downstream operations, including pipelines and refineries, where possible, by or in partnership with the private sector. This should make you as investors very encouraged that the government it codifies in its legal system the principle that this should be private sector driven. The reason they have chosen to go that route here is because they recognize quite clearly that to get an effective oil and gas sector and an efficient oil and gas sector, it must be private sector driven with regulation by the government. For those of you who follow Iraq closely, you see that maybe some of our friends in Baghdad don't agree with this vision of oil and gas. They want it to remain a highly controlled and led by federal government entities. If you look at the number of new barrels of reserves brought online since 2003, if you look at the advancement of production, if you look at the number of oil companies signed, if you see the ease at which companies can maneuver Iraq, you will see a success story in the Kurdistan region. Does this mean that we don't need a reconciliation between the two systems? Absolutely. The Constitution provides a framework, but it has ambiguities in it, and I'm sure there will be people that are more legal expert than I am to talk about that over the next couple of days. But for now, what we can say is Kurdistan has put into place a legal framework, and they have brought in investors, and we're seeing success stories here. I want to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that are available in the energy-related industry. Now that the Kurdistan region has found 45 billion barrels of oil, They've found hundreds of trillions of cubic meters of gas. They need to expand employment opportunities and economic opportunities for their people, and this will happen with derivative industry, really facilitated by the exploration of oil and gas and the financial benefits that oil and gas is going to bring to